let's start with working wages, living wages, all that sort of thing. I will give you a real world example. When I first got my first W-2 job, because I've worked way before that, I was working at Walmart. I was unloading trucks. I was minimum wage was $5.15 an hour at the time. I got the bump to $5.35 because I was working swing shift. Fast forward 20 odd years, my daughter is working across the parking lot at a different establishment in the service sector, started out $17 an hour. So people go, well, prices change, inflation's change, wages rise, so on and so forth. What's the economic principle behind that, though? Because people just make that comparison all the time between generations without the actual underlying economic data, and then we apply it to headlines and nobody knows what they're talking about.
Yeah. So, you know, at least when I grew up, which I think was the same time that you grew up, minimum wage was not thought of to provide a living wage, right? The truth is, the jobs, at that point in time that paid a minimum wage were those jobs where it was relatively easy to find people to do the work. Work was relatively uncomplicated, unphysical, very much plug and play. No education really needed. And also ones where they expected significant turnover, right? And so that was, an accepted part of doing business is to have that high turnover. Um, Wages, of course, rise, as you said, with inflation, but also with how the economy changes and whether businesses are having to bid to get workers to come work for them, right? We, as workers, we want businesses to be strapped for needing for people, and therefore have to bid up the wage in order to attract us over, right? That's same thing happens in football, right? Two teams are competing for one player that they both really want. What do? Um, they bid up the size of the contract, right? So if you happen to have a skill set that gets in demand, right, you can benefit from that. One of the things that we saw during the COVID economy, to go back, is we actually saw for the first time in a long time that the wages at the lower end of the scale were rising significantly faster than the wages at the top end of the scale. For a long time, we have seen the returns to work increase sizably for the what I would call higher skill, which I do not like that term, but it is used by economists. But that reflects more of the highly educated. Maybe that's what I'll use because I think that's a better term. To the highly educated, to the capital owners, right? But during COVID, because there was a lot of demand for folks in these sort of service sector positions, wages for their labor went up significantly, which was a good thing. But for the last 30 or 40 years, generally, wages have not kept up with inflation. They have not kept up with standard of living. So that makes it hard, some would say, to exist on two families earning minimum wage. So then the idea of a living wage comes in. So that's a wage that, if you look at the basket of goods that someone can purchase to live, so small house or renting a room, enough to pay for food and the very bare bones basics, right? The living wage is an estimate. There's all sorts of estimates for that, but it might be upwards of like $20-$25 depending on what state you're in, right? Minimum wage is much lower. So one of my tropes that I have about the minimum wage in general, right, is that I think it's a football played with both sides. The reason why minimum wage is never kept up, one, it was never intended to be a living wage. Two, it's nowhere close to even being a binding wage on most Americans, the vast majority, like nearly all of them, because the minimum wage is such that it's actually set below the market clearing wage. So it basically has no effects. So if you raise the minimum wage a little bit, it's not changing the grand landscape of employment too much. You might see some localized effects. Certainly some old studies back in the 90s saw that, but that might not be as true today. So that's sort of like my general roundup on what's going on with this. So we can't conflate that the minimum wage is supposed to support a family. The benchmark for that is a living wage. And so then you're comparing the two to say, wow, if you're earning minimum wage, then you're not able to take care of a family. And for a lot of reasons that is true. Some of the folks that might earn minimum wage might have been like you and I, right? We started off, 15, 16. My first job, Andrew, if I don't know if I told you this, I was a janitor at McDonald's. I was earning minimum wage, right? I was not trying to support myself. I was trying to earn some summer cash. You might have retirees, folks that only be in the part-time, want a lot of flexibility. Their partner is earning. So, I think we should get off on the tangent of what is the minimum wage good or bad? Is it providing a living wage? Clearly not. It's more of, where are we going as a society with the advent, I would say, of what's going to happen to a lot of these jobs when the technology changes and we face up to the reality that AI is going to come in a little bit, because it's going to have an impact on a lot of pieces of the labor force.
Funny you bring that up, because the door greeter at the Walmart I worked with had worked there for nearly 30 years. She had worked away and then had moved back to my hometown when they opened the first Walmart. Because she had been there through the stock splits and had done the stock stuff, she was technically on paper a multimillionaire. She had, but it was just because of the stock splits of the 80s and 90s. Because for you young kids, Walmart 30, 40 years ago is what Amazon is now. It was exponentially growing. If you had stock in the late 70s of Walmart by the 90s, you were a very happy person.
And let's you were very lucky too, because there are plenty of firms that she could have wound up working for aren't really with us anymore.
And Mr. Sam was actually pretty progressive when it came to things like stock options to his employees and things like that. Read the books on Mr. Sam, the guy that founded Walmart. Fascinating dude.